Now, as we've been hearing a few minutes ago, BBC Tees understands that a Middlesbrough taxi driver has been given a licence despite having been convicted previously of drink driving. The council hasn't commented on the specifics of the case, but says it agrees with rehabilitation following offences, and people shouldn't be punished for life because they've done something wrong. It's also emerged the driver in question attended a drink driving course as recommended by the court after his conviction. So is this kind of rehabilitation the way that society should be treating its ex-offenders? Well, Chris Bath is Director of Projects at Unlock. That's the National Association of Reformed Offenders. And I asked him if he saw any problem with giving a convicted drink driver a taxi licence.
I think in this particular case the council should be actually congratulated. I mean, our principle as an organisation is quite simple. People who break the law, accept it, but serve their punishment and change the way they behave should not be treated as if they are criminals. I mean, it's one thing to remember that these are only the people who got caught, but I should say in this council, in this case, the council is really supporting a broader agenda, which is unthinking discrimination against people who have convictions in the past is essentially the reason why we've got the terrible reoffending rates that we've got, the overcrowding prisons that we've got, and it's costing the taxpayer a fortune. So while those people who think this is a bad idea may feel that they're somehow benefiting the community, actually, if you look at the bigger picture, they're doing a lot of damage.
Is it more important to look at the specifics of a particular case or a specific individual?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously there are going to be cases where people with previous convictions are not appropriate for particular jobs, and there is a balance to strike between individual freedom and the protection of the public. So there are certain people with certain offence histories who you wouldn't want to put in certain circumstances. So that's absolutely the case. But I think in this case, there are historical examples. I mean, Wolverhampton Council earlier in the year granted a taxi licence to a reformed offender who, in his earlier years, had a string of 30 offences, but they'd received absolutely no complaints about him as a taxi driver because he's changed his ways. So it does matter the individual case.
Do you think enough ex-offenders get a second chance like this?
No. I think that the purpose for our organisation, the National Association of Reformed Offenders, Unlock, is essentially that is exactly not the case. We all criticise people for being involved in crime, for not going on the straight and narrow, not bucking up and getting a job and getting off benefits. But of course somebody's got to give them a job. Someone's got to give them an opportunity. And it makes absolutely no sense to force people onto benefits or even to a life of crime because we refuse to accept them back into society by giving them a bank account, getting them a job, giving them somewhere to live. So we're cutting off our nose to spite our face when we discriminate indiscriminately against people with convictions.
Christians, of course, talk about the importance of forgiveness, but do you think that as a society, when it comes down to it, we tend to judge people more on what they've done rather than how they've responded to what they've done?
Possibly so. I think that the trouble we have is that a lot of the messages that go out through certain channels in the media whose aim is to sell newspapers or, whatever, sell advertising on TV. And those are the messages that we get. And I don't criticise anybody for not thinking deeply about every single subject because there are so many. But when it comes to crime and rehabilitation, I think it's just worth us taking that extra look, an extra time to think about the individual circumstances and a little bit, I'm not a religious person myself, but a little bit of that there, but for the grace of God sentiment to think about how we could have ended up in that situation and how we would have reacted.
And of course there must be many offenders who don't reform. What do we do with them in that circumstance?
Our principle is that everyone should be given the opportunity to reform. I think realistically there are some people, a very, very, very small proportion of people, maybe 50 people who aren't going to get let out of prison, for whom the balance is in favour of them, the public continually being protected from them. But bear in mind that while there are maybe 50 of those people, there are 85,000 people in prison, and at the last count there are 8 million people in England and Wales who have previous convictions. 1/3 of men under the age of 30 have some sort of criminal conviction. So you can't legislate for tiny little statistical aberrations. In the most part, people are, with the right support and the right help and the right effort on their own personal part, able to change their ways and reform.
Now, it's Chris Bath, Director of Projects at Unlock, the National Association of Reformed Offenders. As I was saying, Christians talk about forgiveness. Do they practice what they preach? If you've got a thought on that, should this driver have been given a licence or not, in your view? And if not, why not? And if yes, why should he? Then do give us a call, 01642 225511, or you can text 81333, start your message with the word tease, and text charged at standard network rates.